Well, welcome to the Positively You podcast. I'm your host, Jessie Larson, and I'm passionate about helping you shift the way you think so you can create a life you're absolutely obsessed with. Each week, I'll be bringing you a guest or a thought that's going to help you feel more optimistic and equipped to take real action. Get ready to push past limiting beliefs, ditch that negativity, and start showing up as the best and most positive version of you. Girl, let's do this. Welcome back to another episode of the Positively You podcast. I'm super excited this week because we have Missy Allred on. And you know what? Every time I get a guest on, I always send out a little interview form and just kind of a sheet to get to know them a little bit and what's their favorite things to talk about. And when I pulled up Missy's sheet, you guys, I was lit up. I'm so excited to talk to her today. So Missy, welcome. Welcome to the Positively You podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah. So before we dive in to the topic that has me all fired up, who are you and what are you all about?
Okay, so I'm Missy. I'm a mom of three. I have 3, 4 and under. So
oh gosh,
I am in the thick of it right now. And it's taken me a long time to get to the point where I enjoy the toddler years and the chaos that comes with that. And so that's what I help moms do is I help them love where they're at and do it in a way where they feel calm, because I think we struggle with that so much as moms, where we just feel so stressed out and overstimulated all the time. And then our kids get overstimulated, which overstimulates us. And it's just this never ending cycle. And so I help moms regulate so that they can stay calm and then help their kids regulate. And then when we're in that regulated space, we can then go into what most of the coaching world talks about, which is the mindset, thought work side of things. So the two pieces hand in hand, the regulation and the thought work together, just create the most beautiful blend that it's been seriously life-changing for me. I am
absolutely
a way happier person since finding all of this.
Yeah, you know what? That's what I loved about what you wrote down, because I think a lot of us, mindset is not really a new thing anymore, right? We've heard it, mindset matters. And I really love that you were like, it wasn't sticking though. And I think sometimes when we know that like, yeah, our mindset is key and we need to have this mindset things. And then we fall into these like, we get angry or we lose our cool or whatever. And we're like, oh, I know better. I know better. And then we can fall into the shame and the self-judgment and all of that. So I loved that you were like, I was missing this piece of regulating myself. Like, yeah, I knew the mindset part, but like, you can't just like grin and bear it and like put your rose-colored glasses on and sunshine and rainbows your way through every single scenario in life. And that's where I love that you were like, that was the missing piece, is this nervous system regulation. And when you marry the two together, magic happens. And so I'm so excited to dive into this more, because it's going to stop. Number one, I think it's going to stop shame. That was the first thing that like the light bulb that went on in my head when I was reading over your stuff was like, oh my gosh, this is a shame stopper, which is fantastic.
I love that. And it's so true. Like I never put the words to that, but yes, that's exactly what it did.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So let's get down to the basics really quick. And what even is our nervous system? What's its basic function? Why do we have it? And why does it matter? Okay. That's a lot of questions for you.
That's okay. It all is so connected. So that's perfect. Okay. So our nervous system, on our most basic terms, it's like the connection between your brain and your body. And so from your brain down to your body and your body up to your brain. And so there's all these different connections that go back and forth. And so it starts with stimuli comes into our body and then our brain interprets that. So that's going to be anything you see. I mean, like go through your 5 senses, like it's all of that, but it's also so much more than that too, because if you just look up wherever you are, like I am sitting here looking out my back window and I see snow on the ground and I see grass and I see some trees and bushes, but it's so much more than that because it's every grade of every blade of grass. It's every dip in the snow. It's every rock. It's every branch, every leaf. Like that is so much visual stimuli coming in all at once.
Yeah.
Plus then you have the sound. Like if I was still, I could hear like my heater going or my kids playing in the background, or, you know, who knows what else. There's so much going on. So remember that as we go through this, and understand, like, of course you get overstimulated as a mom. There is so much coming in, and there's a part of our brain that is basically the filter for that stimuli, and it decides what is important enough to go through into our brain and what doesn't matter. So just to give you an idea of what this might look like, when you get a new car, all of a sudden you see that car everywhere you go, right? And you're like, everybody has this car. How did this happen? I've never seen this car before. But it's because all of a sudden we told our brain this piece of information matters. And so it lets it slip through. And so with all the mom things, it's all important because it's our kids. And so it all comes through, but then it's so much for our brain to handle. Okay. So starting with that. So we have stimuli coming in, and our brain has to interpret that. And it gives meaning to it, and it decides, am I safe? Am I not safe? That's like the ultimate goal of at least the lower parts of your brain. Those more primitive parts is, we need to keep you safe.
Yeah.
And so if we're not safe, then we go into fight and flight. And I'm sure you've probably heard about fight and flight. So what happens is parts of our body shut down because they're no longer important. So our digestion shuts down, our prefrontal cortex, which is that very front part of your brain. It's the very last thing to develop. It's not until like your mid-20s that your brain is fully developed. That part shuts off. That's our higher order thinking. That's problem solving. That's anticipating consequences. That's where we can plug in new thoughts, that like rational, anything like that gets turned off. Because when you're running from a bear, you don't have time to go, okay, should I play dead? Should I climb this tree? Should I just run for it?
Yeah.
Should I go hide? You don't have time to think through all the possibilities. You just have to go. Okay. So this is the way your brain is supposed to work. When your kid falls off their bike and their knee is gushing blood, you don't have time to be like, okay, what's the best course of action? I don't really know what I should do. You just have to act.
Yeah.
Right. So this is a really awesome part of our brain, except that now most of our not safe looks like we don't want to bring up difficult conversations, or something triggers us from our kids, whether that's simply just being overstimulated, or, you know, they hit on like that little nerve that you're like, oh, I know I need to work on that, whatever it is, right? Our brain doesn't distinguish between that being chased by a bear and needing to work something out with your husband. It's all this. Okay.
Right.
So really good that we have these, but it's a lot. Okay. So parts of our brain shut down. Like I said, digestion shuts down, and cortisol increases and adrenaline increases, and all these things happen in our body. Okay. And this is really good. Again, we need this, but we also need to come back out and go back to this rest and digest, higher order thinking state.
Yes.
The problem is most of us don't know how to do that. And so we get stuck in fight and flight. And this causes all sorts of issues because, again, we don't have that higher order thinking. We're constantly just reacting instead of being intentional about how we respond.
Yeah.
We start to all sorts of things happen, like physically in our body, if we're constantly in this state of stress. I mean, blood pressure increases and weight gain can happen, and like a million different things. Seriously, like it's not just like, oh, I'm constantly angry. It's like, this is affecting your body, and our body starts to shut down.
Absolutely. Well, if you sticking with the bear, and now like not even analogy, but like example from the past, like, yeah, you're being chased by a bear. You're not constantly being chased by a bear. Like eventually that threat is gone. Either you died and you got caught by the bear, or you got away. Right. But like that situation is not ongoing. Like it will be resolved one way or another. And can you imagine if that person was just constantly always running from a bear, how that person's life would be? Like
But
they
that's what
wouldn't
we're
be.
doing.
Exactly. So we're that person that's constantly running from this bear. And if you think about it in that example, you'd be like, well, he wouldn't last very long. Like at some point, he's going to burn out. He's going to get tired. He's going to
Exactly.
make a mistake. He's going to whatever. And yeah, that's what we're doing. Like we're not living a good life if we're constantly never getting out of that, which, hello,
Yeah.
hi, that's why we're talking today.
And this is why our temper is short. This is why we yell
Mhm.
at our kids. This is, all these different things. This is why, because like you said, the bear eventually goes away, but the daily stresses that we face, especially as moms, are kind of always there. And so we have to be intentional about coming out of that state. But most of us have never learned how to do that. So, I mean, really, that's why it matters. Like, it doesn't just matter for our physical health, but it matters for our mental health and our emotional health and the mental and emotional health of literally everyone around us. Plus,
Yep.
if we can learn how to do this, we can then teach our kids. And then they just have these tools. Like, what an amazing thing that we can give our kids once we've learned this.
Oh, yeah. That's always my biggest thing. And my kids are obviously a little bit older than yours. And it's been interesting to see how this work plays a part in them now as they're getting older and as they're learning these things. And I keep saying to especially my oldest who's 12 and in junior high now, you're learning this now. Like, how lucky for you that you get to
Yes.
figure this out now. And, that can feel like an added pressure on us as moms sometimes to be like, oh, I've got to figure this out so I can help my kid. Like, but it's not that. It's such a gift of like, wow, the work that I'm doing on myself isn't selfish because it's rippling out and it's allowing my kids to learn it earlier and to give them really cool tools. So rather than it feeling like this pressure of like, oh my gosh, now another thing on my plate, right? Like I've already added all these other things, but to kind of just shift this work into like, what a gift for you and for everyone else involved in your life.
Yeah. And if you can start with you, I mean, kids learn best from just watching you. And it's
Yeah.
so funny. I mean, I'll give some examples later, but my 4-year-old all the time will be like, "Mom, do you need to go calm down? Do you need 5 minutes?" Like he knows because he
Hmm.
watches. And so he'll even start doing that of, I just need to go calm down for a minute. And he'll go in his room and he'll come out a couple minutes later and he's more calm. Like they learn. You don't have
Oh,
to
yeah.
sit, okay, here's what we need to do next. I mean, as helpful as that can be, they learn best just from watching.
Absolutely. Even yesterday, my 7-year-old after school, I could tell he was kind of on edge and having a day. And I walked in the door and he was just standing there and he goes, Mom, I need a good hug. And I said, okay. And so I picked him up and I gave him a hug. And I was like, do you need a 20-second hug? And he was like, yeah, I need a 20-second hug. So we sat there and we counted to 20 and we hugged and stuff. But yeah, I didn't tell him like, hey, sometimes you need like some physical contact and you just need like to know you're safe
Yeah.
or whatever. He learned that and he's been able to now advocate for himself by example. And I was like, wow, what a cool thing that he's been able to learn, but it's through us putting in the work and learning it for ourselves first.
Yeah, I love that. And that's actually one of my very favorite tools is giving hugs, especially with my kids. That is what they need. And how many times has that happened for me too, where I'm like, I just need someone to hold me, let me cry
Hmm.
for 5 minutes, and then I'm good. But I do that, especially my 3-year-old. That is like his go-to is when he's starting to lose his mind. I'm like, Kate, do you need a hug, bud? And we'll just sit there and I let him determine how long it is. Sometimes we're there for a couple minutes and sometimes it's like 3 or 4 seconds. And he's like, okay, I'm good now. I'm like,
Yep.
awesome.
Yep.
You go do your thing now. But it makes such a big difference.
Oh, absolutely. Huge difference. So, okay. So then we're kind of talking about like way far in the future when we've not accomplished, but gotten here. But we know now like regulating is really important. We talked a little bit, we've just mentioned like touch, physical touch, and getting a hug. Do you have a couple of go-tos or where can we start kind of being like, all right, you're right. I am not regulated at all. Hello, please help me. Like, where do we
Okay.
start?
Um, so a lot of these are going to work for, okay, how do I say this? I kind of do this in two different ways where some things I use while I'm in the heat of the moment when I really just need to calm myself down. But a lot of the same things will work. I try and make sure that I'm staying regulated throughout the day. So, like, I set an alarm on my phone for every couple hours just to remind me, Kate, it's time. That's about how our our rhythms work in our body is about every 90 to 120 minutes. We kind of need a little reset. And so if you can consistently do that, then we're not falling into that fight or flight response quite as often. But a lot of the same strategies work. And so as you practice staying regulated, it will also help in the heat of the moment. Because remember, we don't have that higher order thinking. And so if we can practice, then it becomes muscle memory a little bit more, and we don't have to think about it. We just kind of do it. Okay.
Yeah.
So let me give that caveat that practicing makes a huge difference so that you can help yourself. But when you are in that place where you feel that, there's an analogy that Lauren Pace uses, and she talks about her lava is rising. And if she doesn't calm her lava down, then her lava explodes. And this is super helpful with my kids, but for me too, where I'm like, yep, okay, mom's lava is rising, you know? Yep. So as that lava is rising, you feel that, right? Like
I'm like, that's a good analogy.
Like shake, right?
Yes.
That one of my favorite things to do is I will sit and rub my arms or do circles on my chest, just that physical touch, but like that, it's a little more pressure.
Yeah.
That can calm me right down, especially when I'm like, oh, you get to that point where you're like, you just want to like grab your kid and be like, oh, move out of the way. I can't do this anymore. That is like my go-to when I'm feeling that like physical, I need to do something, because it takes 5 seconds and I can do it. I can do it in the car. I can do it in the middle of the grocery store. I can do it in my kitchen. Like, it doesn't matter. I can do it wherever. That is one of my very, 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 very favorites, is rubbing your arms or circles on your chest. Another one you can do is just a few deep breaths. Breathing is really interesting because it's both automatic and, oh my goodness, I can't think of the word.
Yes, we breathe automatically.
We can think about it, and we can not think about it. Yes,
there is a word there. It's also
I know it's like totally gone from my mind. Anyway, so it's both automatic and intentional, and so we can kind of reset our brain if we start to breathe intentionally, and if we can breathe out longer than we breathe in, we can tell our brain that we're safe again, because when you're in that stressful situation, your breathing becomes more shallow.
Yep.
And so that longer exhale tells your brain, okay, I'm breathing slow. I must be okay. So slow, deep breaths with that longer exhale can be really helpful. Even a couple minutes of exercise, whether that's go on a walk really fast or turn on a song and do a dance party, because part of, again, remember, like we're feeling that we're hyperactive, right? We have too much energy that we need to let out.
Yep.
If you're feeling that, that's when the physical movement can be really helpful. But sometimes that hyperactive looks less like the shaking and more just like tense. We're really stiff. And so that's when I like to relax my body instead. So instead of moving my body, I need to relax my body. And so a couple of things I do for this is, I guess more if you're at home, because in the grocery store, this wouldn't work. But think about Toy Story, where the toys go, Andy's coming, and they just like fall on the ground, right? Just like wherever they're at, they're just super limp, right? Obviously, grocery store won't work. But if you just need to go like flop on your bed, that's a really good thing to do. Another thing you can do is like a progressive relaxation technique. So go up or down your body and just relax every muscle group. If you're right in the moment, even just going the muscles around your eyes, your jaw, and your shoulders. If you can do those 3 places, like if you just do it right now, I'm like, oh, I'm not even stressed right now, but
you'll find, yes, I'm always
holding tension there. Yeah. So even if you can just do that, that brings you back to the present, and it starts to kind of like tickle that prefrontal cortex because you have to do a little bit of intentional thinking, and it can pull you out and bring you back into that rested, I like to call it a resilient state.
Yeah.
So we're going back from this really stressed out state to a resilient state. Okay. Yeah. So those are probably my favorite few things that I can do mostly anywhere.
I love those 3. It's kind of funny. Your first one where you're saying your arms, I was thinking about, I kind of do something like that. Mine's a little different, and I can't do it in a grocery store because people think I'm crazy. But it's like when you're feeling that like overwhelm and pressure, it almost feels like there's a weight on you, right? Like that's where the phrase like weight on my shoulders or like carrying the world on my back kind of thing comes in. And I will literally be like, there's too much on me and like shake it off.
Oh, I
Like
love that.
literally be like, get off me. I shake my hair, I shake it all off. And I'm like, there's too much that's not me and it needs to get off of me. And then with the breathwork and movement, we actually had a really good episode. It was episode 136 just a couple ago with Crystal Zinn. We talk all about that. So if you are curious to dive in to more on like the breathing techniques and all of that, she actually shared a bunch that you can do like as you listen to the episode. So I'll link that in the show notes below. And then with Andy's coming, I think this is really funny because I'm thinking about the clues and the things that we learn from our kids. So often we think that we're teaching them. And then when I take a step back, I'm like, oh, I can learn a lot from you. And I'm thinking of you falling on your floor. And how often have our kids been overwhelmed and they throw a tantrum and they fall on the floor and they scream?
My goodness,
And
I
it's
never
like,
even thought about that.
right? And it's like, okay, you can't do that. What are you doing? What are you doing? And you're like, but as I'm thinking about like what a child's tantrum looks like obviously we can't be having them all the time and we need to like figure out safe ways to get that energy out. But that's what they're doing. They're screaming it out, they're getting it out. They don't have the language that we have as an adult. But I don't know, I'm kind of reframing my like thinking around a tantrum right now that's them trying to get back to a regulated state in the only way that they know how.
My mind is blown right now.
I know.
I never made that connection. But this seriously just happened the other day. My 3-year-old like ran into his room and like threw himself on the ground and is just like laying there. And that's what it was. That's totally what it was. But in the moment, I was totally frustrated and get off the ground. We need to be doing this. But that's what he was doing.
Yeah.
And isn't that funny that we come programmed that way and we almost deprogram
we
that
work it out of us
kids.
because it's not acceptable. You
It.
can't be doing this when I'm almost thinking like I would kind of want to go shut my door and throw myself on the ground and just scream. And I'd probably feel way better after.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. That was like super helpful for me for that reframe, especially with little kids where the tantrums happen often still.
Yeah. So there you go. I don't know. Those were just like the 3 little like light bulb moments that came on to me as you were talking. So those are my little insights from there. Okay. So with that, I wanted to talk to you about helping our kids regulate. That was a good kind of segue there with their tantrums because obviously we can't be having tantrums just all of the time. And so teaching our kids these tools while allowing them to still feel safe to feel their emotions and everything. Do you have good tips or things that we can do to feel calm as we're letting our kids regulate themselves?
For us to feel calm.
Yeah. Because that can be hard, right? Like a lot of times we're like, stop your tantrum, stop your tantrum. It's because we're not calm. But like, how can we help ourselves feel calm and also help them regulate their big feelings and big emotions?
Okay. So for us, again, doing those things that we talked about already before you go and handle them, that alone can be really helpful. Or this is where thought work can be really helpful too, right? It's putting both pieces together because once we're regulated, then again, we have that higher order thinking. And so all of a sudden the thought work becomes way easier because we're in a frame of mind where we can even comprehend and think clearly and all of that. It kind of just clicks into place. And so this is a good place where we can use both. So starting with doing a little bit to regulate yourself, even if you're feeling okay, taking a second and taking a few deep breaths and just going, I'm so glad I get a chance to help my kids regulate, or they're doing the best they can, or, whatever it is that you need to think to get you in that right frame of mind. Start there for you. And then with your kids, again, with them, when my alarm goes off for regulating me, I try to regulate my kids too. And
okay.
Yeah, just keep them regulated as much as possible. And it makes a really big difference where the tantrums don't happen as often. They're still going to happen, but they have that reset so often that they're not getting to that stressful state because they're able to stay in that zone of resilience, right? So we can kind of, as we reset, we can kind of expand that zone again, and then it kind of shrinks down as time goes on, and then we can expand it again where if we're not doing that, then they can really quickly fall over into that stressful side. Okay.
Yeah.
So with your kids, a few things. Be paying attention into what triggers them. What is sending them into that fight or flight? And remember that sometimes fight or flight can also be freeze. So, for example, my 4-year-old, he is very sensitive to noise stimuli, unless it's his own. But to like other things, like we've taken him to like a basketball game, and I just watch him totally shut down. We just went to Disneyland a couple weeks ago, and he just shuts down. And it's that noise that is just so much for him that he goes into that freeze. And so I know for him that I need to reset him or have headphones or, something like that. So watch out for things like that of what is it that they're really easily triggered by.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is watch for how they respond when they are stressed or when they're getting there. So my 3-year-old needs less stimulation. And so one of the best things I do for him is we have like little pop-up tent like little play tents, right?
Uh-huh.
And so I'll send him in there with a book and a blanket, and all of a sudden there's less to see. It kind of muffles the noise a little bit. There's just so much less going on, and he can just focus. He has a soft blanket, and that brings him back to calm so fast. He'll stay in there, read a couple books, and then he's good. With my 4-year-old, he's the opposite, where he needs more stimulation.
Mm-hmm.
And so he needs movement more than anything else. And he's my outside kid. So I'll send him outside, or I'll send him to obviously it's going to look different kind of depending on ages of kids, but he will do like animal walks. So like a bear crawl or a crab walk or, something like that. Or he starts making up his own. He'll slither on the ground like a snake, just that movement. Or I'll create like a little obstacle course for him in the house or something to get him moving. And then that brings him back to calm. So like bedtime is a really good time to kind of see which way they tend to lean.
Yeah.
So he starts bouncing off the walls and climbing up and jumping off their beds, and he goes crazy. So I know that that's where he tends to lean to. So when he's overstimulated, we need to move. When my younger son is overstimulated, we need to come back to calm. And he's the one that I hug it out with.
Yep.
Because he needs that safety, that calm, that pressure, and then he can go back and be his happy self. So I know that's kind of hard where it's like, you kind of just have to watch and see what they do, but
I love that example because I say this all the time on this podcast, take what works for you, figure out, try it around, experiment. And I think it's the same with our kids about really paying attention and seeing what things work for what kids. And yeah, I mean, I totally wish we could just hand you a worksheet and say, follow X, Y, and Z, and here's your perfect little answer. And life would be amazing if it all worked that way, but it doesn't. But yeah, like really cluing in. And the same thing for you too. Like some of these practices, like for you, breathing and slowing down your breathing might not be your thing. Like maybe your thing is actually like going for a run. It's not my thing, but it might be your thing. And so really like when it comes to regulating, I think that's the big key is really cluing into like, okay, when was a time that I did come back to calm and what was I doing? And the same thing with your kids. I think that is, you hit it on the head of really paying attention to what each one needs.
Yeah. And again, that's where it can be really helpful to be practicing throughout the day, because then you can kind of try things out, right? Try out the more relaxation techniques, try out the more movement side of things and see, okay, what's working for me. And it might depend a little bit on the situation. Sometimes you do need to just relax and sometimes you do need to move, but try different things out. And, maybe you do need to go for a run just around the block or something and just, everybody sit tight. Let me go run up the street and back really fast.
Yeah.
And maybe you just need to like go throw on a song and have a little dance party by yourself. Or maybe you need to go like scream it out in your closet, but having that time to just practice while you're already in a place that's not reactive and explosive. can be really helpful, because then you can go, okay, I know what works and here's
Yep.
what I'm going to do. Because again, remember, when we're in that fight or flight state, the lower parts of our brain are working. And so that's where memory is going to be. And like muscle memory too, mental memory and physical memory are both going to be in that lower part. So even when we can't think through what we're going to do, if we've practiced beforehand, we can just go do it. Because how many times have you, once you've calmed down, you come back to a situation and you're like, oh, I should have done that. Why didn't
Yep.
I think of that? And it's because
Yep.
that part of your brain isn't working. Like there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with you. It's just that part is off. And so if we can practice and have it in a place where we can already use it, we're so much the better.
Absolutely. Well, and here's the thing. There's actually proof there that that muscle memory is working, because you're reverting back to just what you've, like, if it's what you've always done, right? If I'm the mom that always snaps and always yells, then in that heightened state, of course, you're going to go back to it because your brain's like, this is what we do here. So it is working. It's working that way. And so if you can practice that, you already have the proof that it works because you've been practicing it just in the other way and not intentionally. Which I think is awesome. Like that's a really good example. And in an emergency, that's not the time to be experimenting with those new things. So yeah, I love that. And I love the setting the timer and giving yourself an actual practice to doing that. I think timers and alarms are amazing because, especially for moms, so often we're like, yeah, I'll make time for that. Definitely. I'll work on my regulation. And then, weeks go by and months go by and we haven't done it. So yeah, just setting little reminders during the day of like, oh, this is what I'm going to take a couple minutes to do my square breathing or do whatever. Like, oh, so good. And this is where I want to tie in the mindset piece to it to kind of wrap it all up. Is I'm thinking about the mom who is maybe feeling really overwhelmed, feeling really snappy. In fact, I was just having this conversation with a friend earlier today where she was like, I don't know what's up with me. Like, I'm yelling at my kids. I'm feeling like really like, oh, just, wanting to whatever. And having that thing of, oh, I'm just an angry mom. Oh, I'm such a mean mom. I'm mad all the time. I'm angry all the time. I have such a short fuse. Is that helpful? Those kind of words, like, you know what I mean? Like that's
Absolutely
that
not.
mindset and the things that you're saying. So if you're feeling like you're an angry mom,
Sweet.
besides just practicing these regulations, what can you do mindset wise, or what do you do mindset wise to kind of marry those two things together?
Okay, so remember at the beginning, we talked about that filter that tells us what is important. The same thing happens in that filter with our thinking. And so if we say, I'm an angry mom, I'm a whatever you're calling yourself mom, I'm a bad mom, even, the more we tell ourselves that, the more our brain lets in the things that prove that thought true.
Yep.
And so if we can start switching it to a new thought, even if you don't believe it yet, we've now readjusted that filter. And so now we're going to find all the cases that we are a good mom, that we are a patient mom, that we are a resilient mom, that we are whatever mom that you're trying to be, a calm mom. If we can readjust that filter, we now find those things. And then as we find those things that prove it true, it becomes more true because we now have taken on that identity. So first of all, I guess just decide what mom you want to be. Do you want to be a calm mom? Okay, find ways it's already true. And remember through all of this, like hopefully you've at least come away going, okay, I can give myself grace. I understand what's going on in my head a little bit more.
Yep.
And so of course I'm like this and I can do something about it. So even just starting there, like I have been like this and I get to change it.
Absolutely.
And it can be as simple as like 5 minutes a day, literally. Right. But trying on new identities of I'm not this mom, and recognizing too the difference between an identity and a moment where I was angry in this moment.
Yep.
An hour ago, I yelled at my kids.
Yeah.
But I'm an angry mom. And there's a really big difference between those two things of being,
absolutely,
I had an angry moment, because then I can go and I can say, guys, I'm so sorry. Mommy got really angry. My lava rose and I let my volcano explode. Instead of going, oh, I'm just a terrible mom, because then, like you said, that's where the shame is. And then we spiral, and there usually isn't. When I'm feeling shame, I usually don't repair with my kids. And Like it just spirals. And so if we can change our identity and see things as I had a moment versus I had a bad moment versus I am bad. I had an angry moment
Absolutely.
versus I am angry. That makes all the difference. And it takes work to practice that. But again, if we can get to this more calm, regulated state, that thought work is a million times easier. Like I can't tell you how much better my mindset has been over the last however long it's been since I figured out this regulation piece.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden now I'm in that place where I can even think clearly and have it stick in my head versus constantly fighting myself, really.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think that's huge. I love that you brought up repairing and apologizing and letting your kids in on that. I think that that's something kind of new to our generation a little bit. I don't know, no shame or shade or anything in our parents, but I don't know that they apologize to us a lot. And I think that that's really important. I did that just this last week where I took my kids after a little blow up and said, "Hey, that was not cool. I lost my cool. I'm really, really sorry. I'm going to try harder next time." And they were like, "Okay, cool, done." Because they're like, "Yeah, you're not a mean mom. You're not an angry mom." I think that's really huge. I also think allowing yourself, sometimes those affirmations and those mindset shifts can feel really hard if you are identifying as like, I'm an angry mom or I, am whatever, to say, then it just out of the blue, I'm a calm mom. And then you're like, well,
Yeah.
that's a lie, and I'm thinking if I'm setting my alarm on my phone to regulate and I can have a little note there with my alarm that says, I'm working on being a calmer mom,
I
and then
love
have
that.
that, because then it's like, I'm working on this. I'm doing this. Like, this is part of something. Again, it's not my identity, but it's something that I'm working on. I think you're huge with that. There's a difference between your identity and a moment. Like, oh my gosh, if we can tattoo that on our foreheads,
We would
just
all be the better for it.
oh my gosh, like that is huge. If you take nothing away from this, just knowing like your identity is more than a moment.
Yeah.
And I think that that is so huge. But I love this of marrying the mindset with the regulation, with the practicing beforehand, and with the repair after if you do have, slip ups or mess ups or whatever, because we're human and we all do. So,
Yeah. And it's going to happen. So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So having the tools to be able to go, okay, I know this is going to happen. Here's what I'm going to do. That's another thing that can be really helpful is the practice takes a little while, but going, okay, today, when I blow up, when I end up stressed or overstimulated or angry, whatever it is, when I get to that place, because I know I will at some point, here's what I'm going to do.
mm,
Because again, it moves it back down to that memory piece in your brain. And so even if we've just made the decision of, okay, when this happens, I'm going to rub my arms 3 times, right? Be very specific about here's what I'm going to do. Then again, that decision is taken out. And so we can still access that part of our brain when we're in the heat of the moment.
absolutely. Because you're relying back on that like memory. You've already made the
Yeah.
decision. Ooh, I love it. I love it. I've loved everything about this conversation. Missy, if I'm like, help me, I need more, where can we find you? And what kind of things do you have in the works to help moms feel better?
Hey, so I am on Instagram. I'm at the Missy Allred. So just my name, nice and easy to find. I have a freebie that's a kids regulation freebie. And so it just gives you some really basic ideas to go back and remember of the different things you can do with your kids and kind of how to start watching for what they need. In January, I will have 2 things open. I will have the Reset, which is a month-long program that goes through, and we go through this, and there's a challenge every single day of building on, let's start regulating ourselves, let's start helping our kids regulate, but it's piece by piece, one thing at a time, instead of, okay, here's all this information, you just go figure it out. And it gives like a lot of background of like, hey, this is how things work and how you can help yourself and help your kids. Anyway, so that's the Reset. And then I also have a 6-month program that is called The Village. And it is moms coming together for accountability, and we'll have classes and guest speakers and just a place where you feel like you have, everyone talks about having your village, but I think a lot
Yes.
of us don't even know where to start. And so that's what I want to give you is your village, where you can come in when you're having a good day and need and want some cheerleaders to celebrate with you. And when you're having a bad day and need some ideas of how to help your kids and how to help yourself, and the growth that I feel like we kind of stop seeking as we become moms. So all of that wrapped up into one. So keep an eye out for that.
Awesome. I love it so much. You've got so many good things in the works, and I can't wait to send everybody over to you. All of the things that Missy mentioned are going to be linked in the show notes to find, easy to click on, easy to find her. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show today, and for everything that you're doing and putting out into the world. You're making a huge impact, and I'm always grateful to the people that are making an impact. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
Thank you for hanging out with me again today. I'm so glad you pressed play. If you want to take a quick second to share this episode with someone you think would love it too, that would be amazing. If you're loving the show, make sure you go and leave a review on iTunes. Reviews are like magic for podcasts, and your review will help get this show into the ears of more amazing women just like you. And come find me over on Instagram. I'm there at positively.jessie, and I cannot wait to hang out with you some more. So until next time, have an amazing week.